Cambridge Analytica for political purposes. Well, we're joined now by Steve Kuncevitz, who's a lawyer who specialises in intellectual property and social media and sits on the Law Society Council. Thanks for being with us. What are the rights of people who are on social media generally, but Facebook in particular, when they use that social media site?
Well, the rights of anybody that uses Facebook, anybody that discloses personal data to a third party or to anybody, is to be informed as to what happens to that data. And I think that's the big issue here, in that Cambridge Analytica might say that they only used a relatively small number of people initially, but then once they had friends commenting on these surveys and other bits and pieces that they filled out, they've ended up with over 50 million people. And it's very hard to say that they knew how that data would be used once it was disclosed.
Are people not generally aware that, you know, if they're on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever, that their data is either used for commercial purposes, for market research purposes, that kind of thing, or conceivably political purposes as well?
I think you could conceivably say that they're aware of their personal data being used as a business by Facebook, but that's the big issue here, that they weren't aware of the scientific research necessarily that was going on behind it, and the fact that that data then found its way into the hands of a third party. So whilst you may say the public should do more to be aware of the fact that they're sharing large amounts of personal data online in this way that can potentially be very lucrative, certainly how that data is used needs to be made an awful lot clearer.
So, yeah, I mean, should it be clearer? How does it work with the terms and conditions when you sign on to that?
Well, that's a fair question. The terms and conditions tend to be very complex and people don't necessarily read them, and that is part of the issue. Data protection law in particular is changing post 25th of May when the new general data protection regulation comes in as mandated by the EU. That and data protection law generally is all about the choices and the rights of an individual data subject. That's the person who hands that data over. Normally that is predicated upon them giving consent as to how their data is used, but there's a very strong argument to say that if you can't say how that data is going to be used, you can never really give consent, no matter how terms and conditions may try and suggest otherwise.
So following on from that then, could Facebook users conceivably sue Facebook, take legal action against them for the misuse of their data?
It's a possibility. We've recently seen a case against Google over the use of tracking software in Safari that was actually held in the UK courts, and there is now a possibility that we may see civil claims as a result of what's happened. We may see regulatory action, given that the Information Commission has gone to get a warrant to inspect Cambridge Analytica. And certainly I think the big issue we have, or the big uncertainty, is we just don't know where this is likely to end just yet.
But also, I mean, Facebook is clearly based in the United States, in San Francisco. Would people here in this country have legal claims over a company that's based in America?
Potentially. It's difficult, but it's not impossible. As Google found, we need to find some connection to the UK. We need to convince the UK courts to take jurisdiction in hearing this particular case, but it's certainly not out of the realms of possibility.
Do you think this whole episode means that maybe there needs to be, or will be, kind of legal clarification over social media in general and the use of people's personal data?
This incident happens at a time when the Information Commissioner is investigating the use of personal data in political campaigns generally, and a lot of privacy lawyers I know have talked about the data tipping point for quite some time, and it's conceivable that this may well be it, given the nature of the data that we're talking about and how it was used. So certainly awareness of data protection, awareness of privacy is low, but the more we see incidents like this, the more we see data breaches that really affect the public and potentially have much wider effects, certainly we're going to see a bit of an opinion change in the public in general.
All right, thank you very much for being with us. That's Steve Kuncevitz, a lawyer specialising in intellectual property and social media. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, let's get more on that story, because tonight Channel 4 News has broadcast more from its secret filming of Cambridge Analytica, in which Mr. Nix, the chief executive, spoke about the influence that the company had on the American presidential election campaign.